Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisance, Lucifer Prabhupada. So we'll resume a discussion on the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita, beginning from verse 19. Jnanam karma cha karta cha tridevya guna bhedatah prochyati guna sankhyane yathavat shrunutanyapi. According to the three different modes of material nature, there are three kinds of knowledge, action, and performer of action. Now, hear them from me. So, the previous set of 6 verses, 13 to 18, were an introduction to Gyan. Right? So, they were summarizing the Gyan Kant of the Bhagavad Gita, which itself is 13 to 17, 18 is summation, and were more so summary of the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna speaks about Jnanam, Gayam, knowledge, object of the knowledge, Purusha, the enjoyer. And these 6 verses essentially establish the equivalency of karma and Gyan, which is what Krishna did in the 13th chapter. Now, beginning from this verse 19 until verse 40, Krishna is going to summarize chapters 14 through 17, which essentially are the chapters that talk about the modes of material nature. So Krishna says that according to the three different modes, there are three kinds of knowledge, action, and performer of action. So essentially, we will see that 6 aspects of the impact of the modes are going to be discussed. And for each of the 6 aspects, they will be discussed according to the 3 modes. So, in all, Krishna will talk about 18 items over here. The 6 aspects in each of them in the 3 modes. So, first is knowledge. That there's knowledge. So, what I'll do is that I'll give a summation with a reference to the verses, and that way we will go through the verses fairly quickly. Right? So this summation helps us to get a bird's eye view. So knowledge is going to be spoken in verses 19 to 22, and knowledge in the mode of goodness will allow one to see spirit. One in the mode of passion will actually see the body, and one in the mode of ignorance will simply see his work as everything. Then the second is action. This will be spoken in verses 23 to 26. Then action in the mode of goodness is according to the scriptures. Action in the mode of passion is according to the false ego. And in the mode of ignorance is against the injunctions of the scriptures. Then the third is the performer of action. This is discussed in verses 27 and 28. So one who is detached, who is unwavering in success or failure, works in the mode of goodness. One who is greedy to enjoy the fruits of the work is in the mode of passion. And one who works contrary to the scriptures, is morose, cheating, and lazy, works in ignorance. Then the fourth is understanding. This is discussed in verse 29 to 32. So the one in understanding is able to distinguish between what should be done and should not be done, and does what should be done. One in the mode of passion is not able to distinguish, and sometimes does what should be done and sometimes does what should not be done. And one in the mode of ignorance only does what should not be done. Then determination is discussed in the verses 33 through 35. Determination in the mode of goodness is unbreakable. Then determination to sense enjoyment is in the mode of passion, and determination that results in laziness, that results in procrastination, that is constantly changing, is in the mode of ignorance. Then happiness is discussed in the verses 36 through 39. Then happiness in the mode of goodness is like poison in the beginning and nectar in the end. Happiness in the mode of passion is like nectar in the beginning and poison at the end. And happiness in ignorance is delusion right from the beginning to the end. So Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that the 14th chapter gave the three division of the modes of material nature. Right? And the general distinction was that the mode of goodness is illuminating, the mode of passion is materialistic, and the mode of uh, ignorance is conducive to laziness and indolence. Then in the 17th chapter, Krishna described the different types of worship by different types of men and different kinds of modes. Right. So in this verse, Prabhupada says that Krishna describes the different kinds of knowledge, workers, and work itself according to the three modes. Okay, let's go to the next verse. Verse 20. Sarvabhuteshu yenaikam bhavam avyayamikshate avibhaktam vibhakteshu tajjnanam vidhi. That knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities. Though they are divided into innumerable forms, you should understand to be in the mode of goodness. So, this is knowledge in the mode of goodness, where one sees the varied physical entities in their true spiritual nature. Next verse, verse 21. Prathakvena tu yajnanam nana bhavan prathakvedan veti sarveshu bhuteshu tatjnanam vidirajasam. That knowledge by which one sees that in every different body there's a different type of living entity, you should understand to be in the mode of passion. So, goodness saw the unifying spiritual nature of the soul that occupies the material body. Mode of passion, they confused between the body and the soul. And there are different kinds of confusions, because of which there are different non-shastric pseudo philosophies that try to explain this point that Krishna makes, that in every different type of body there is a different type of living entity. Right? So note the stress on the word different type. Now there is obviously a different living entity, but there are pseudo philosophies that will say there is a different type of living entities. So some of these philosophies are like the Lokayatas. So the Lokayatas believe that the body is the soul. So they consider the body to be non-different from the soul. Then the Jains, they believe that while the soul is different from the body, it assumes the size of the body. Right? So there is a different soul in a person who is a male as opposed to a female, who is big as opposed to small, who is an animal as opposed to human. So that's the Jain philosophy. The Buddhists believe that while the soul is different from the body, it is temporary. And when enlightenment happens, the soul is extinguished. The Mayavadis believe that the soul is essentially God covered by illusion. And the Nyaya, they believe that the soul, different from the body, is conscious, giving shelter to various kinds of qualities. So these doctrines speak about the fact that are intrinsically contradictory to the Vedas and are thus considered to be in the mode of passion. Sri Prabhupada talks about them in his purports. Next verse. Verse 22. Yattu kritashnavad ekasmin karya saktam ahitukam athatvarthavadalpam cha tattamasamudharatam. And that knowledge by which one is attached to one kind of work as all in all, without knowledge of the truth, and which is very meager, is said to be in the mode of darkness. So this is essentially the knowledge of animals or humans who live like animals. So an animal is not really concerned about body, soul, distinction between the body and the soul, any philosophical introspection. They essentially are mostly looking at their knowledge is essentially completely based on their survival. So they know how to hunt their prey, they know how to avoid the predators. So this is the knowledge of the humans also in the mode of ignorance, that they essentially consider the work to be everything. The focus in life is to make exploit the most of the work. They're not concerned about any kind of philosophical uh, analysis. So Krishna has now spoken about the three kinds of knowledge. Knowledge in the mode of goodness, by which one sees things as the scriptures show, that there are different bodies, the soul within them are qualitatively the same. That there's knowledge in the mode of passion, wherein they have speculative philosophies about the role of or the relationship of the soul and the body, which is not based on the scriptures. And there's knowledge in the mode of ignorance that essentially does not concern itself about any adhyatmic or spiritual aspects, but simply focuses on material existence. Next verse. Verse 23. नियतं सङ्ग्रहीतम् अरागदेव सतः कृतम् अफलप्रेपशुना कर्म यत्तत् सात्विकमुच्यते. That action which is regulated and which is performed without attachment, without love or hatred, and without desire for fruitive results is said to be in the mode of goodness. So previously Krishna spoke about knowledge in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Now he'll speak about action in the three modes. This verse talks about the action in the mode of goodness, and no surprise, the the defining characteristics of action in the mode of goodness is niyatam sangarahitam. And it is according to the scriptures, niyatam. And how is it performed? Sangarahitam. That it is without attachment. Araga devasata kratam. Arag means that without any rag is passion or any kind of strong involvement. Arag means performed neutrally as one's duty. Then dveshata, arag dveshata. So no love, no no hatred. Afala, meaning that without any desire to enjoy the fruits of the action. And yattat satvikam uchyate. That is actions in the mode of goodness. So this is a consistent theme that Krishna uses to define the activities in the mode of goodness, that they're performed with detachment according to the injunctions of the scriptures. These two things should always be there. So in the purport, we'll see that Srila Prabhupada talks about how this closely relates to Krishna consciousness, that the scriptures are meant to satisfy Krishna. So when he's performing activities in the platform of bhakti, then niyatam, they are automatically according to the scriptures. And because one is trying to please Krishna, then sangarahitam, then the modes are absent. Arag dveshata, because there is no personal desire to enjoy, there is no happiness for success or distress on failures. Afala, because all the results are given to Krishna. So Prabhupada is taking us to where Krishna will subsequently take us, which is that as one gets liberated from the modes, one heads to bhakti. Next verse. Verse 24. Yattu kamepshuna karma sahankarena va punaha kriyate bahulayasham tadrajasam udharatam. But action performed with great effort by one seeking to gratify his desires and enacted from a sense of false ego is called action in the mode of passion. So the main characteristic of the mode of passion is the mentality of being the doer and the enjoyer. And because of that, one performs ugra karma. That one will, in order to maximize the enjoyment, they are completely invested in performing excessive activities simply to gratify the desires which can never be gratified. Because desires are like fire, and gratifying desires are like putting fuel in the fire. So these are activities in the mode of passion. Next verse, verse 25. Anubandham kshayam himsam anapekshya cha paurasham mohadara bhayate karma yatyattam samuchyate. That action performed in illusion in disregard of scriptural injunctions and without concern for future bondage or for violence or distress caused to others is said to be in the mode of ignorance. So, tamasic activities, Krishna gives four characteristics of it, that it is performed in illusion. What's the illusion? About the position of the self. Then, disregard of scriptural injunctions. This is essentially the defining attribute that the person performs with disregard of scriptural injunctions. So, in the previous, we saw the mode of goodness, even the mode of passion is performed according to the scriptural injunctions. But the mode of ignorance, there is no concern for the scriptural injunction. Right? From this basis, everything else comes out. Because the person disregards scriptural injunction, the person is in illusion. And without concerns for future bondage. Right? Because disregarding scriptures is essentially going to give sinful reactions, which means hellish conditions or falling to lower life forms. So such a person is not concerned about future bondage. Like if a person is eating meat, then even though the scriptures say that the consequences of eating meat is that you suffer in hellish planets for a very, very long time, you take births as animals and you yourself are killed. But because the person disregards the scriptures, they act whimsically, so they have no concern about the future suffering that is in store for them. And that's why they cause violence and distress to others. So they kill animals or they kill other humans or they cause distress to them only for their sense gratification. Right? So these are the actions in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Action in the mode of goodness is according to the scriptures and with detachment. Action in the mode of passion is still according to the scriptures but with attachment. And action in the mode of ignorance is neglecting the scriptures and with complete attachment to enjoyment. Next verse. Okay, verse 26. Mukta sanganaham vadi dhritya utsaha samanvitaha siddhya siddhyor nirvikaraha karta sattve kuchyate. One who performs his duty without association with the modes of material nature, without false ego, with great determination and enthusiasm, and without wavering in success or failure, is said to be a worker in the mode of goodness. So, previously, Krishna had described the three kinds of work. Now, he describes the three kinds of workers or doers. And there is a difference between the two. There you'll see that there are similar characteristics. Like the work in the mode of goodness is work that is performed without attachment to the result, and a worker in the mode of goodness also acts with detachment. Right? But the reason Krishna tells them separately is because they don't have to be always the same. A worker in the mode of goodness may circumstantially perform a work in the mode of ignorance, and vice versa. And also, in describing the workers, Krishna talks a little bit more about the internal consciousness, whereas the work essentially is the external manifestation. And so, Krishna so far has described the three kinds of knowledge and three kinds of work. Now he's going to describe the three kinds of workers. So, what is the characteristics of a worker in the mode of goodness? That he is devoid of the desire for results and the concept that I am the doer. He is devoid of the need for self praise. He is he is equipoised, tolerating both the suffering as well as the benefits that one gets by performing various kinds of happiness activities. Sorry, and he is he is simply committed to perform the the work, uh, not because it gives him any fame or enjoyment, but because it is given in the scripture. So, such is the worker in the mode of goodness. And Prabhupada says that a devotee is automatically in the transcendental mode of goodness. Let's go to the next verse. Okay, verse 27. Ragi karma phala prepsur labdo himsatmako suchihi harsha shokhanvitah karta rajasa parikirtitah. The worker who is attached to work and the fruits of work, desiring to enjoy those fruits, and who is greedy, always envious, impure, and moved by joy and sorrow, is said to be in the mode of passion. So, ragi karma phala prepsur. The two defining characteristic is ragi and karma phala prepsur. So, such a person is attached to both the activity as well as the fruits of the activity, as opposed to the person in the mode of goodness who is detached from both of them. So, what is the result of this attachment? That he is lubda, he is greedy, he is envious, he is unclean. So, because work is everything, the person does not care whether the work is suchi or asuchi. And because he is attached to the fruits, he will be envious of the others who he will perceive as stealing the fruits from him. What is the result of this? Harsha shokanvitaha karta. That he is happy when he gets what he needs and unhappy when he does not. So he is constantly being tossed in this duality. Such a person is a worker in the mode of passion. Next verse. Okay, verse 28. Ayukta prakritah stabda shato naishkrito lashaha vishadi dirgha sutri cha karta tamas uchyate. The worker who is always engaged in work against the injunctions of the scriptures, who is materialistic, obstinate, cheating, and expert in insulting others, and who is lazy, always morose, and procrastinating, is said to be a worker in the mode of ignorance. So, the basic characteristic is that such a person works against the injunctions of the scriptures. And from this, the other characteristics of the worker manifest. That is materialistic, obstinate, cheating, etc. So, with this, Krishna has concluded his description of the worker in the three modes. So, he has talked about knowledge in the three mode, he has talked about work in the three mode. Now, he has spoken about the workers in the three modes. Next verse. Verse 29. Buddhir bhedam triteschaiva gunatastri vidam shunu prochyamanam asheshena Prataktvena Dhananjaya. O winner of wealth, now please listen as I tell you in detail of the different kinds of understanding and determination according to the three modes of material nature. So, Krishna has talked about knowledge and work and doer or worker, right? Prabhupada in the purport uh, actually equates it to, so he says, after explaining knowledge, the object of knowledge. right? So considering the equivalency of karma and gyan, Prabhupada translates it to actually in the context of gyan. So he says that Prabhupada says that Krishna has talked about gyan, he has talked about gayam or the object of knowledge, and the knower, the the jiva, according to the three modes. Now Krishna is promising to speak about two more things, which is intelligence and determination. Right, so in the subsequent 6 verses, he will speak 3 verses about intelligence and the more of goodness, passion, and ignorance, and determination in the corresponding three modes also. Right? So intelligence is close to knowledge, but it's a lot more subtle than knowledge. Right? Intelligence is what drives a person to to acquire a certain kind of knowledge. Like intelligence is what drives a person to do or not to do. And similarly, determination is the drive to perform a certain kind of action. Next verse. Verse 30. Pravritim cha nivritim cha karya karya bhaya bhaye bandham moksham cha yaveti buddhim sapartha satvika. So here Krishna is talking about intelligence in the mode of goodness. And Prabhupada uses intelligence and understanding interchangeably. They're essentially just synonyms. So in this verse, the key factor is karya karya. That person in the mode of goodness knows karya, what should be done, and akarya, what should not be done. And Krishna gives three considerations. He says pravritim cha nivritim cha. So pravritim is doing and nivritim is not doing. So essentially that means that the person knows what do the scriptures recommend and what do the scriptures prohibit. Then the second is bhaya bhaya, that there are certain activities that result in that should be feared, and there are those that that should not be feared, right? So essentially this is talking about activities that result in one's suffering, and activities that results in one's happiness. And then finally, bandham moksham cha yaveti. There are activities that are binding and activities that result in liberation. So knowledge that helps the person follow the scriptures, understand the distinction between sakam and nishkam, and guides the person to the stage of fearlessness is considered to be in the mode of goodness. Next verse. Verse 31. Yaya dharmam dharmam cha karyam cha karyam eva cha ayathaved prajanati buddhi sapartha rajasi. O son of Pratha, that understanding which cannot distinguish between religion and irreligion, between action that should be done and action that should not be done, is in the mode of passion. Right, so in the mode of goodness, Krishna had described the attributes of the activities, and in the subsequent 2 verses, he describes which attributes will be absent to to cause the understanding to be degraded or colored by the mode. So in the mode of passion, there is a confusion between dharma and adharma, and between karyam and akaryam. So the person lacks a clear understanding of the scriptures. So sometimes he will do prohibited activities and sometimes he will avoid recommended activities. So that kind of intelligence is in the mode of passion. Next verse. Verse 32. Adharmam dharmamiti ya manyate tamasavrata sarvarthan viprititamscha buddhisapartha tamasi. That understanding which considers irreligion to be religion and religion to be irreligion, under the spell of illusion and darkness, and strives always in the wrong direction, O Partha, is in the mode of ignorance. So, in the mode of passion, there's confusion between what is right and wrong. In the mode of ignorance, there is more of a conviction, but towards the wrong. Right? So, the person will consistently avoid that is recommended in the scriptures and do what is prohibited in the scriptures. Why does he do it? Under the spell of illusion and darkness. Because the person has his intelligence is covered, he will act in the contrary way. So such a person is in the mode of is acting in the mode of, or his understanding is in the mode of ignorance. So Krishna has now spoken about the three kinds of understanding in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. In the mode of goodness, the understanding is abiding by the scriptures and understanding the difference between the importance of being being impartial or equanimity. In the mode of passion, the understanding is one of confusion between what is right and what is wrong. And in the mode of ignorance, there is a consistent attachment to do what is not recommended. Next verse, verse 33. धृत्याया धार्यते मनः प्राणेन्द्रियक्रियः योगेन व्यभिचारिण्या धृति स पार्थ सात्विकी. O son of Pratha, that determination which is unbreakable, which is sustained with steadfastness by yoga practice, and which thus controls the activities of the mind, life, and senses, is determination in the mode of goodness. So, now in three verses, Krishna will talk about the three kinds of determination. So, though not explicitly mentioned here, but the acharyas in Prabhupada, in commenting on this verse, note that this kind of determination is only possible when one is following the scriptural injunctions. So, the attributes of this determination is that the person is determined to make spiritual advancement. From that determination comes the determination to follow the scriptures. And from that comes the other characteristics of determination, that it is unbreakable. It is sustained by yoga practice and it controls the other aspects of one's existence like mind, life, and senses. So, when a person is determined to make spiritual advancement, then the determination translates to following the scriptures, which in turn displays this all these characteristics that are described as determination in the mode of goodness. Next verse. Verse 34. Yatu dharma kamarthan dhrityadharyate arjuna prasangena falakankshi dhriti sapartha rajasi. But that determination by which one holds fast to fruitive results in religion, economic development, and sense gratification is of the nature of passion, O Arjun. So, determination that is very much vested in the results is in the mode of passion. So, of the Chatur Purushad, Krishna mentions three: Dharma, Kama, Artha. And Moksha is not there because such a person does not have a strong determination to make spiritual advancements. But his determination is strong to enjoy. So, that determination is in the mode of passion or rajasic. Next verse. Verse 35. Yaya swapanam bhayam shokam vishadam madameva cha na vimunchati durmedha dhriti supatha tamasi. And that determination which cannot go beyond dreaming, fearfulness, lamentation, moroseness, and illusion, such unintelligent determination, O son of Pratha, is in the mode of darkness. Right? So these qualities of lethargy, of being fearful constantly of what to do, what not to do, moroseness, illusion, these are all tamasic in nature. Prabhupada makes an interesting point where he say, Ya sapanam. So, dreaming essentially just makes, in this context, is fantasizing. Prabhupada says, it's not that the devotees do not dream. They dream, and of course, the dreaming is either ways for them to improve the service or connect with Krishna. But dreaming over here is more in terms of fantasizing, which essentially does not really result in any productive action. So now Krishna has described determination in the three modes. Next verse. Verse 36. Sukham tvedanim trividam shanu me bharadashaba abhyasad ramate yatra dukhantam cha nigacchati. O best of the Bharatas, now please hear from me about the three kinds of happiness by which the conditioned soul enjoys and by which he sometimes comes to an end of all distress. So now this is the last aspect that Krishna had promised to speak, which is that of happiness. And Krishna speaks last about happiness because happiness essentially is the motivation for everything that precedes. So even in the mode of ignorance, where one is suffering, but in a perverse way, that is the happiness the person is seeking. Like when a person takes intoxication or drugs, lot of suffering with that, but somehow the person, because of the perverse mentality, draws enjoyment from that. Prabhupada gives the example of a camel eating a thorny plant. That the thorns cut the mouth of the roof of the mouth of the camel. It feels the pain, it sees the blood, but it thinks that's what enjoyment is. Right? So in the next three verses, 37 to 39, Krishna will speak about the three kinds of happiness. Next verse. Verse 37. Yattadagra visham eva pariname mritapo Pamam tat sukham satvikam proktam atmabuddhi prasadajam. That which in the beginning may be just like poison, but at the end is just like nectar, which awakens one to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. So the characteristic of the happiness in the mode of goodness is that it begins feeling like it's poison, which means that something that is bitter, that looks like it is difficult to swallow, that looks like it is actually killing you, but it ends like nectar. Right? So essentially, this is happiness that is derived from following the scriptures, because the scriptures is full of injunctions which may go against the propensity of the conditioned soul. Following these injunctions feels like poison. But because the scriptures are the words of Krishna, they elevate the person to the higher modes, and that ultimately results in liberation, which feels like nectar. The essential characteristics of this happiness is that it blossoms by repeated engagement. So how does poison change to nectar? Only through the process of engagement. That the same activity that one does. So we have examples of that ourselves, right? Sometimes, especially for devotees living in the temple, but generally for the devotees, recommendation is to go for Mangalarti. In winters, it means that you get up at 3:30, take a bath, get ready. You're in time at 4:30 for the opening of the curtains. In winters, it feels like poison. But by continuous practice, then the reciprocation happens, and then one actually becomes attached to it. One actually gets many realizations out of it, and it begins to generate happiness in, as if it is nectar. Next verse. Verse 38. Vishendriya samyogad yattadagre mritopamam pariname visham eva tat sukham rajasam smritam. That happiness which is derived from the contact of the senses with their object, and which appears like nectar at first but poison at the end, is said to be the nature of passion. So goodness was that it appears as poison at the beginning and nectar at the end. Here it's the opposite. It appears as nectar at the beginning. Why does it appear like nectar? Because it is derived from the contact of the senses with the object. So the conditioned jiva is essentially striving to achieve this in the material world, to engage the senses with the object. So which is why it appears like nectar. But because the nature of the material world is that it is dukhalayam, that it is actually a place of misery, eventually this turns to poison. And Prabhupada gives an example of an engagement between a conjugal engagement between a man and a woman. So if they come together only because of lust, then initially the engagement appears like nectar because they're enjoying each other out of lusty desires. But because the nature of lust is that one is only looking at their own enjoyment at the expense of others, eventually this lust will convert itself into anger and wrath, which means that it then becomes poison. Right? So this is happiness in the mode of passion. Verse 39 Yadagre cha anubandhe cha sukham mohanamatmana nidralasya parmadotam tattam samudaratam. And that happiness which is blind to self realization, which is delusion from beginning to end, and which arises from sleep, laziness, and illusion, is said to be the nature of ignorance. Right? So, uh, happiness in ignorance is both that it is miserable from the beginning and it ends in misery. Right? So, we saw happiness in goodness was it was poison at the beginning and nectar at the end. Happiness in the mode of passion was nectar in the beginning and poison at the end. And happiness in the mode of ignorance is poison at the beginning and poison at the end. And the fourth kind, which Krishna will speak later on, is happiness in bhakti, which is nectar in the beginning and nectar in the end. But here Krishna talks about happiness in the mode of ignorance. So the characteristics is that such a person is blind to self-realization and is therefore deluded. So because he's performing activities, then there is no scope of the person making improvements. So Krishna says that from the beginning to the end, the same delusion persists. And what are some of the symptoms? Laziness, lethargy, sleep, illusion, intoxication. These are the happiness that a person or happiness in the mode of ignorance. Okay, next verse. Verse 40. न तदस्ति पृथ्व्यां च दिवि देवेषु वा पुनः सत्त्वं प्रकृतिजैर्मुक्तं यद् एभिः स्यात् त्रिभिर्गुणैः. There is no being existing either here or among the demigods in the high planetary systems which is freed from these three modes born of material nature. So Krishna is now concluding the section on the impact of the modes of material nature by talking about their universality. That everybody in the lower, middle, or upper planetary system is impacted by these modes. Now, the effect of the impact may be more or less. In the higher planets, the effects of the mode of passion and ignorance is lower compared to the lower planets. But nevertheless, the statement that Krishna says is is axiomatically correct, that everybody is impacted by the modes of material nature. So to summarize, Krishna spoke about the the six aspects that were impacted by the three modes. So he talked about knowledge, talked about action, the performers of action. he talked about understandings, he talked about determination, and he talked about happiness. Right? And the Acharyas said the verses also means that there are many other things. So one should not think that these are only the six things that are impacted by the modes, but Krishna has picked the six prominent things. But almost every aspect of one's existence is impacted by the modes of material nature. So uh, this concludes the second section of the 18th chapter, which was a summation of the Gyan. Right? So uh, Krishna has essentially talked about uh, the nature of work or karma. He talked about how to get free from the reactions of work, the impediments in that, which is the modes of material nature. Now, Krishna, in the next set of verses, is going to talk about how to escape this modes of material nature. He's essentially going to talk about liberation, and he will talk about it as the yoga ladder. It- So, he will take us all the way from Sakam to Nishkam and all the way till Bhakti. So, we'll end the discussion over here. Thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.